Okay, hello again. We're going to talk about internet and online communications, and in particular social media, and continue that conversation which we started last time. Get into a little bit of history here. How did we come to be where we are today, where we depend so much on the internet and spend so much time with social media? How did we arrive at this particular place? So we're going to start by talking about a fellow you probably haven't heard of named Jack Kilby. And Jack Kilby was the inventor of the microchip. And without the microchip, your smartphone, laptop, none of that is possible. Kilby, very interesting fact is that he was from Dallas or worked in Dallas. His career was in Dallas with Texas Instruments. And so we have a little video here. I'm not going to play you the whole thing. It's really an interesting piece of work. And KERA Channel 13 in Dallas created this. But we're just going to watch a minute or so of it here about Jack Kilby, inventor of the microchip. And we'll move it up here. Very amusing little animation at the beginning of this.
If you look back to the first great wave of American innovation, I'm talking about Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, Henry Ford, engineers who changed the daily life of the world with a good idea. They were global heroes. Jack Kilby changed the daily life of the world just as spectacularly as Thomas Edison did and Henry Ford did, and nobody's ever heard of him. Jack was a Kansas boy. He was a real level-headed, straightforward guy. He had his feet on the ground. He knew what he was doing, and the most unassuming person, probably the most unassuming Nobel laureate in the history of physics.
I never realized that other people's dads couldn't fix the TV, and I have this memory of him with his head in the back of the opened-up television and my mom running for the circuit breaker, you know, afraid he's going to electrocute himself, and he's like, you know, I'm an electrical engineer. I think I can do this one okay.
Texas Instruments started out as an oil exploration company.
I'm going to pause it here because it gets into the background of Texas Instruments, which is very interesting. But we just really don't have time to spend on that. But Jack Kilby invents the microchip, which makes it possible for a computer to be inside your smartphone or your laptop. And if you watch that video, you will see some images of computers in the 1950s, and it would take up an entire room. So the miniaturization that first transistors made possible, but then Kilby figured out a way to even further miniaturize by basically putting multiple transistors on a tiny little piece of technology that you saw him holding there with tweezers called the microchip. So it starts there. And then we get into the beginnings of the internet, and the internet starts really with the Department of Defense. And you all probably in your history class have heard of the Cold War, which existed from the 50s into the 90s. And this was the U.S. and the Soviet Union, what is now called Russia, facing off against each other as at first the only nuclear powers in the world, and then later certainly the greatest nuclear powers. And this was a time of tremendous tension, and the U.S. Department of Defense was involved in the development of nuclear weapons, and this involved research, and they were looking for ways for computers to link with each other, to be able to communicate together. And they came up with something then by 1969 called ARPANET. And this was computers able to share information and link together. And there is a fella who is still alive, he's still with us, who is considered the father of the internet. And his name is Vint Cerf. And Vint Cerf was involved in the creation of the ARPANET and then the internet, which evolved from the ARPANET. So here's a very nice video with Vint Cerf, the father of the internet.
What is the internet?
The internet is like a popular thing.
Some satellites up there.
I picture in my head with like waves of internet going to the phone.
Somebody told me a cloud once.
The internet is a lot like plumbing. It's always moving.
Most people don't have any idea where the internet came from, and it doesn't matter. They don't need to. It's sort of like asking who invented the ballpoint pen or the flush toilet or, the zipper. These are all things that we just use every day, and we don't even think about the fact that one day somebody invented them. So the internet is just like that. Many, many years ago, in the early 1970s, my partner Bob Kahn and I began working on the design of what we now call the internet. It was a result of another experiment called the ARPANET, which stood for Advanced Research Projects Agency Network. It was a Defense Department research project. Paul Barron was trying to figure out how to build a communication system that might actually survive a nuclear attack. So he had this idea of breaking messages up into blocks and sending them as fast as possible in every possible direction through the mesh network. So we built what eventually became a nationwide experimental packet network, and it worked. Is anybody in charge of the internet?
The government controls it.
Elves, obviously elves.
The people who control the Wi-Fi, because then no Wi-Fi, no internet. T-Mobile, Xfinity. Bill Gates. Bill Gates.
Bill Gates. Right?
The honest answer is, well, nobody, and maybe another answer is everybody. The real answer is that the internet is made up of an incredibly large number of independently operated networks. What's interesting about the system is that it's fully distributed. There's no central control that's deciding how packets are routed or where pieces of network are built or even who interconnects with whom. These are all business decisions that are made independently by the operators.
I'm going to pause that there, but that is it's very important, very interesting to think that the internet is not controlled by any particular government, not by any particular business, and we're going to, one reason for that we're going to talk about very soon. But it is something that is shared by the world, and it's not owned by the U.S. government or any other government or any other business. The young man you see there is named Sir Tim Berners-Lee. And he's still with us, very much so. And he is the inventor of the World Wide Web, which came about in 1990, and which seems fairly recently to me, but it's getting less recent all the time. So I'm gonna show you something real quickly, and I wish I had more time. But when I was working for Texas A&M in College Station, I was working for the engineering program in communications. Early 90s, we used to, we were online and using the World Wide Web and not giving it a heck of a lot of thought at the time. But we used to see web pages like this without much art, without any art work or illustrations at all, no video or music, just nothing but hyperlinks. And this, in fact, is the first web page, which still exists. And this was created by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and is still there where people can see it. But you can see how far we have come with the World Wide Web since 1990. I'm going to show you a little video here on Tim Berners-Lee, who is now Sir Tim Berners-Lee. He's a British citizen.
$1.5 billion. That's the number of people who are now coming together in one place to learn, work, and share their lives. It's a place we're all still building, minute by minute. The inventor of this giant virtual playground was an English software engineer, Tim Berners-Lee, who, lucky for us, in the 1980s was suffering from a serious case of information overload at work. Based at CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research in Geneva, Berners-Lee was trying to coordinate a mass of different data formats, research papers, and incompatible computer systems from contributors all over the globe. Berners-Lee daydreamed of a different way of organizing information, more useful, more intuitive, more human. Could he use his computer at CERN to create a space where any piece of information would be linked to any other piece of information in the outside world? He realized that to do this, he'd also have to link two ideas that had been knocking about quite separately for some time. The first was hypertext, which was a way of linking documents together using one word to immediately take you to another useful document. These hypertext documents were already commonly used on individual databases and CD-ROMs. The second idea was the internet, an internationally agreed method of allowing one computer system to send files, messages, or data as packets of coded information to another connected computer. Berners-Lee needed to mash these ideas together to create a network of global hypertext, allowing linked data or documents to be accessible to anyone connected to the internet. He called it the World Wide Web. Never mind the world, if anybody was going to get linked up at all, Berners-Lee knew that the system would need rules to make sure everyone was speaking the same language. And so he wrote them. Every single piece of information would have an address, like a postcode, where the computer could find and retrieve it. The computers would talk to each other through a set of recognizable protocols, and a common language would mean that any document could be converted into an understandable format for any other computer. And that was it. No central mainframe, no giant bureaucracy, no corporate HQ. No one was going to control the web. It wasn't a physical thing to be owned. It was a space for everyone, and nothing, therefore, would be off limits. Those three rules that Berners-Lee had devised were in fact only there to ensure everyone's contribution, from the grassroots up, could exist and be linked to on an equal basis. And passionately believing those contributions mustn't be at the mercy of financial barriers or hierarchies, Berners-Lee gave his idea over to everyone to use, for free.
We'll pause that there. That's a pretty extraordinary thing that Tim Berners-Lee did not patent the World Wide Web and allowed it to be used by anyone who wanted to use it, governments, businesses, individuals, and that is still true today. So it's an incredible story, the story of Tim Berners-Lee. And I don't think it was in this class, maybe it was, that we had a reading assignment recently that Tim Berners-Lee is presumably working on something that would take the place of the World Wide Web as we speak. And so that is an interesting idea, and be fascinated to see what comes from that. So the internet had 1 million users by 1992, and about 90% of Americans as we speak are now online. There's an interesting piece of research here from the Pew Center, which I think I've said before, I think is very, very good as far as research is concerned, dependability of research. Interesting question there. 7% of Americans don't use the internet. And question being, who are they? And one thing we can see is that they're almost entirely over 65. That would tend to be older folks who just never have come around to using computers or using the internet. But so virtually everyone is online. Here is this is Steve Jobs. Of course, was one of the co-founders of Apple, and Apple is certainly not the only computer company, but it may have been, I think it is, the most influential computer company. You know, the iPhone in particular has just been revolutionary. It's changed how we live. I'm going to show you, there's a lot of information I'm skipping here, and so if you're interested, you can come back in here, and I think you'll enjoy looking at some of these things. Apple created the Macintosh computer, desktop computer, and promoted the Macintosh in a commercial that aired in the 1984 Super Bowl. And this commercial ran one time. And it is largely considered by people who write about advertising as the greatest television commercial of all time. And it introduced basically not only the Apple Macintosh computer, but the whole idea of a desktop computer. I'm not calling it a personal computer because the Macintosh is not considered a PC, but the idea that you would have a computer on your desk. And in early 1984, virtually no one did. So this is the commercial that I was telling you about.
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the information purification directives. We have created, for the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests of a contradictory thoughts. Our unification of the rules is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
And so there's the Apple logo that you recognize. If you've ever heard of the George Orwell novel, 1984, and it's being discussed again a lot, comes up in conversation a lot again these days, you know that 1984 has to do with government, authoritarianism, mind control in particular. And so what they're saying in that commercial, what the idea that's being conveyed is that here is something, and notice that no computer is seen. They don't even really tell you what the Macintosh is, other than I think Apple Computer is referred to. But they're saying that here is something that is going to be revolutionary. It's going to open up the world for all sorts of information and ideas. And it's going to liberate people's minds. And to a great extent, I think that in this particular case, the hype turned out to be true. It surely has revolutionized the world. So that was the introduction of Apple and the Macintosh computer, and really the whole era of computers as something that individuals, average people, would share in, and something that would be part of their everyday life. So the internet and the World Wide Web do not require government license or large investment for the individual to use, and so this has been revolutionary in that it allows the individual person to put ideas out into the world and potentially be seen by millions of people. This did not exist before the internet and before the World Wide Web. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about net neutrality. net neutrality is broadly a First Amendment issue. That's not particularly relevant to this conversation at the moment, but it has to do with government control of information flow, net neutrality. And we go back and forth on this. You may or may not have heard this term. We really don't have time for me to get into it the way it deserves. But as I say, we've gone back and forth. The FCC issued an open internet order in 2011 putting net neutrality into place, and then there were various challenges, and then net neutrality was rescinded in 2017. And this has to do to a great extent with who is in control of the White House and who's in control of Congress. So I expect that we will be coming back to this issue again, and that net neutrality may very well be put back into place. The idea is, and the question, a better way to put it is, the question is some measure of government control necessary to maintain an open internet that anyone can access and use freely? And of course, there's been very little government control of the internet. But going forward, is it necessary for the government to have certain controls that did not exist up until 2011? Or is it better to leave it alone and allow it to be as free as possible of government control? So that is the issue of net neutrality. There's some very good videos there that you can see. Again, I think you'll be hearing more about this in the coming years ahead of us. Again, I'm concerned with not taking up too much of your time here. Personal video has, been just an amazing, revolutionary thing. YouTube wouldn't exist without the ability that you have to shoot video on your cell phone and then share that video. But besides just being entertaining, it has brought about social and political change. I'm going to show you, this is they've got a lot of things here I don't have time to share with you. This is the most viewed video of all time. It's called Charlie Bit My Finger. You may or may not have seen it. It's been a few years since this.
The biggest mistake car owners can make when it comes to taking care of their car's exterior is not really understanding what...
Charlie bit me. Ah. Ah. Oh. Ouch. Ouch. Ouch, Charlie. Ow. Charlie, that really hurts. No, Charlie bit me. And that really hurt, Charlie, and it's still...
I've seen that I don't know how many times, and I still laugh out loud every time I see it. And this particular version of Charlie Bit My Finger has 880 million views, and that's just this particular upload, right? So this is the most viewed video of all time. But there, as you well know, there have been many, many other more consequential videos, things that have had social and political impact, because everywhere we go, someone has a cell phone and is able to shoot video. Not only that, but you have, security cameras everywhere. So very little that doesn't get captured on video. And, that has, there's some positive aspects to that, but there's also some concerns about privacy, as you well know. Coney 2012, I won't take time to show this to you. It's been obviously a few years. This was an example of someone creating a documentary film. It was about a guerrilla war in Africa that the the mainstream media was not paying any attention to, and it got tremendous amount of attention for this war that was taking place in Africa, and made it an issue that that most people were aware of, at least, if not concerned about it. That would have not been possible before the internet and before YouTube and personal video. So it's a wonderful film, documentary film, so if you have time, take a look at that. All right, we'll leave it at that, and thanks very much for watching again.